want to use the word tougher because you're not tough, but
I'm not tough.
adjusted. Oh, well.
I play football.
She thinks she's tough.
Hey guys, it's Olivia and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, thanks so much for stopping by. My mom is going to join me today for this video. So you guys have been asking some questions that you want my mom to answer kind of about my childhood or just having an autistic daughter. So I've written a bunch down and we're going to do a little Q&A session today answering your questions. So Mom, thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
This is Chrissy, my lovely mother, and yeah, we're gonna go over some questions. First question. My daughter was recently diagnosed at 25. I feel guilty for not knowing sooner. Did you struggle with guilt, and if so, how did you overcome it?
That's a good question. I think maybe a little bit. I think that's normal because as a mom, you want to do what's best for your kids and you try, but we're only human as well. I always knew there was something a little different about Olivia. Just felt she sort of marched to the beat of her own drum. And when she saw a therapist in middle school, I remember her saying to me, it's, you know, she's wired differently. And now it all, you know, makes a whole lot of sense. So yeah, I think maybe I did feel a little guilty, but I also have to say the day she was diagnosed was one of the best days of my life because I felt like it sounds terrible, but like it wasn't me. You know, I was trying so hard to be the best mom that I could be, and things weren't always working out the way I wanted them to. So then you go from there. You know, so now that you know, I would say try and shake the guilt because there's so much to explore, and good luck.
Next question. What do you wish you'd done to help Olivia as a child / what are you glad you did?
Well, what I'm glad I did was, the school that I put her in, we were fortunate enough to be able to send her to a small Christian school that, you know, the teachers were just they could be hands-on. She could get a hug when she walked in the morning, which she needed, and she's not a very touchy-feely person.
That's funny because I hate hugs.
Yeah, but it somehow calmed her, and then she was fine after that. And then sadly in the public schools, at least in California, you can't do that. So it was what she needed, and I was so glad that we were directed to that school because it was, you know, it just at that point in her life, it was really, really important. So I was glad that we did that. Another thing I was also glad that I did was I knew her well enough. I kind of knew what her triggers were, and I knew when she started to feel overwhelmed that it was okay to take a day off school. I had a friend who used to give me a hard time about it, but I knew my kid well enough to know that if we didn't hit that reset button, the rest of the week was just going to continue to spiral out of control.
It's funny because if you guys watched my other videos, she's like talking like so closely of what I've already like talked about, and like I just did my school video saying like, oh, it was good, I went to private school, and then I did the other one like about somebody giving you a hard time.
Oh.
When I was being kept out of school.
We all know that was.
Yeah.
Just kidding. But Olivia's videos, I love watching them, but she's not telling me anything I don't already know, which is good, you know. I mean, every once in a while she'll surprise me with something, but for the most part, you know, I lived it with her. You know, I've lived it with her so far, and we're continuing. I mean, I kind of forced her to do certain things to try and make her more social, you know, dance classes and go to some birthday parties and things like that. I don't know if that was good or bad. It wasn't. I know now that it wasn't easy for her, so maybe I should have been a little more sensitive to that. That would be maybe the one thing I could say that I wished I had been a little more sensitive in those situations. I'm such a social person, and so is her sister, so it was sort of hard for me and everybody liked her, even though I know now she didn't think they did. So it was hard for me, like, why don't you want to go? Why don't you want to do this? So now I know.
Next question. How do you handle people who don't think Olivia struggles that much / don't believe she's really autistic?
That's a good question too, because you do present yourself very well, and you're well liked, and you can, put on a good show, shall we say. And I know it's not all a show, because there are people that you do enjoy being around, and it's not all fake when you're smiling and laughing and whatever, but that makes it kind of a double-edged sword, because it makes it hard when people, you decide you don't want to go to a function or and they don't understand why. So now that with the diagnosis, to be honest, it's a lot easier now that she's been diagnosed, because before I was always making up excuses why she didn't want to go, or just so the other people's feelings weren't hurt. And now it's kind of like, she just doesn't want to be here. It's just, it's the way her brain works. I know it's hard to understand sometimes, because you've been around her and she's, been great. But sometimes after those, gatherings, or when we do the street fairs for Unbaked, and she's on and putting on the show, she's in bed the whole next day. I mean, it's like it takes everything out of her. Again, hindsight's 2020, looking back at all the really neat things she's done growing up, and when I tell people, of course, you're a proud parent, you talk about the writing a book, and the kid reporter, and moving to LA as a work for the NFL at 18 when all her friends are going off to college. It's scary but amazing. And just all that she's done, as being an advocate for autism, and her starting her own business, and it's like I used to say her resume reads like somebody that's way older than she is, and has some incredible accomplishments. But a lot of times people would say, "Oh my gosh, Olivia's so amazing," and that's just wonderful. But then I'd have to stop and say, "But it didn't come easy. It came at a price." So when I explain to people that that we know that are concerned, they understand. But before it was a little harder. But now that we know why,
when Cindy first told me that I should look into autism, I remember getting home from Washington and talking to Alex and saying because I think he asked, he's like, well, why would it matter, because you'd still be the same person if you were to get diagnosed. And I was like, I'd have obviously there's many reasons, which I've talked about in my videos, why it was important, but one of the reasons was that I'd have kind of an excuse, not that I'm using it as an excuse, but I wouldn't have to make up lies about why I couldn't. Yeah, an explanation. Right. Yeah, sure. Because I literally told him, I was like, I have to pretend oh, I'm busy, or I don't feel good, or whatever it is, because I can't get myself to go to a function, where now it's people could understand and I wouldn't have to lie. So yeah, It's definitely been great for that reason. Next question. How did you deal with Olivia's meltdowns as a child, since you didn't know what they were? And did you ever notice a pattern for the triggers, which you kind of mentioned already?
Yes. So the meltdown started as an infant, really. Well, maybe from the first day you were born and you ended up at Children's Hospital because you had you were breathing too quickly. They thought you had inhaled some of the amniotic fluid, so they took you from me and took you down to Children's Hospital, and according to the nursing staff down there, you were very demanding. And she's not a loud person, but she had the loudest cry. Oh, yeah. Now they give me a hard time because I can't hear.
Oh my gosh, it's from me. Yeah, she's deaf. Oh, it's my fault.
Yeah. So anyway, so it started there, and then my sister watched her. She had a son that was close in age, and so she was watching her, and she would have meltdowns with her because I had gone back to work. But I did notice the triggers. One was if her blood sugar had dropped, because usually, we could be out having a great time, and then boom, if she didn't get something to eat, it was a meltdown, and there was no hangry. Yeah, and there was no pacifying her. Even as a baby, she was a really good sleeper, and then she would wake up, and the minute her eyes were open, you better be ready to feed her, or she'd be screaming, So it just, the switch would just go off. Even the pediatrician, when she heard her cry, said, "Wow, that's amazing." So her dad and I always said we hope she could carry a tune because she certainly had the volume.
I can't. I mean, I should say that I think I can carry a tune, but I don't think it sounds good. Like, I can carry a tune, it just doesn't sound good.
So as an infant, it was hard because she couldn't communicate, what was going on. But a lot of it, in hindsight, looking back, was, she was hangry even as a baby. And then as she got older, you start thinking it's part of the terrible twos, and and her dad and I are her dad's very strict. I'm probably the softie in the family, but we're also kind of old school and expect, our kids to behave. And I learned not to take her out in certain situations if she hadn't had enough of a nap, because she needed her full nap. If she got interrupted in the middle, there was no going back.
My sister used to sit on top of me in order to
She'd
wake
climb
me
on
up.
top of her, and I'd go, no. Yeah, that was funny, actually, looking back. Not at the time. So
She started pushing my buttons early and has continued since.
But so you start thinking it's maybe part of the, just part of, being a bratty little 2-year-old, a little punk. So we'd have, these battles and where I would just try and get her to behave, and it was difficult. And luckily this stuff usually happened at home because I knew enough when not to take her out if she was just in a funk. You used to say she's in a funk. And then as she got older, I had my cousin came to spend the summer with us, and she was, really, really good with the girls. And at one point, Olivia was having a little bit of a meltdown, and her comment was, "Olivia, you're so inflexible." And I thought, you know what? She's right. It's like it's one way or the other. Everything's very black and white to her. But I also, I tried many things. And so, first I disciplined her because I thought she was misbehaving, and that didn't work. And then I try rectifying the situation. You should be playing with a toy and something wouldn't go right. And so I step in and try and fix it. Didn't matter. Once it had gone wrong, there was no turning back. I tried, hugging her and loving on her and trying to get her to calm down. That didn't work. So it wasn't until I finally learned to put her in her room and let her work through the meltdown while I was standing outside the door. And she, I don't think, felt like she was being punished, but she just needed that space. And that she'd work through it, and then she'd be fine. So, but that wasn't until she was probably about 5 that I finally figured that out.
Next question. At what age did you realize Olivia was different than other children, and what did you first notice?
From the minute she was born. No.
As we already discussed.
I remember in my Lamaze classes, the nurse saying, like, you're either going to have I forget what she called, like a calm baby or whatever, or you're going to have a screamer. She came out screaming. I'm like, oh boy, I got the screamer. So
good.
Yeah, they prepared us for that. It's sort of funny, but joking aside, not that I thought there was anything different about her at that point. I would say it was probably maybe when I saw her interacting with like other kids, and she just kind of wasn't interested, she just kind of want to do her own thing, kind of be in her own little world. She was great around adults usually, and would prefer to be with the adults. I think still does, even though she is an adult now, but she likes to hang out with me and my old friends. Mm-hmm. So I would say probably, as a toddler, maybe 3.
You too, I feel like you mentioned when Natalie was born, you realized.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So her sister came along at she was 2 years and 2 months, and she wasn't the screamer. I could pick her up in the middle of a nap because we had to get Olivia to dance class or something, and she'd be fine. She'd recharge her batteries for 15 minutes and she'd be fine. So they were very, very different babies and toddlers, and they're just very, very, very different. So I think had Natalie come along first, I may have been a little more quick to figure something out with Olivia. I just think I think I just thought, or we thought, we just had a very strong-willed child. And we used to say too, you know, we don't have to worry about Olivia because she's so strong-willed. Nobody's going to talk her into doing anything she doesn't want to do. So as long as she's on the right path, we'll be fine.
Next question. What are things a parent can do to provide a supportive environment for an autistic child as they grow up and then transition to adulthood?
Well, again, a lot of this is hindsight for me because we didn't know. So in talking to therapists and things, you know, it always makes me feel good when they say, "Oh, you did the right thing," you know. But it was, some of it was just instinct, I think, and just wanting to protect your child. But I think just, you know, pay attention to their signs, learn what their triggers are. I think provide a safe space for them is really important. If their triggers are, you know, with Olivia, it's, you know, she becomes overwhelmed when there's too much going on, too much noise, too much, you know, I have a large family. I'm sure she's probably mentioned that in other videos. But from the time she could walk, you know, at age 2, if there was too much going on, she would pull me out of the room. And again, hindsight makes perfect sense. So just, I think, be really aware of that. Listen to your mom intuition and don't be afraid to get professional help.
Next question. Any tips on how to spread your attention across multiple children when one is autistic and one isn't?
That's difficult, I will say. Olivia, because she was a very demanding child, and Natalie was so easygoing, I took advantage of that easygoingness of her sister, and unfortunately, it's, you know, it's kind of come out later in life, you know. So I feel bad. I feel some guilt for that, but it's kind of like in anything. If somebody else is willing to say, okay, whatever, you know, you let them. So I would say, be careful with that. You know, it is sometimes a lot harder to deal with the autistic child, you know, and let the neurotypical child have their way sometimes. And again, it just depends on the dynamics of your kids, but yeah, it's not easy. I will admit that. Hold your ground a little if you have to.
Next question. What signs of autism did you brush off as just being a difficult kid when your child, or when Olivia was a child?
Well, I'd say the meltdowns, you know. I mean, you hear about the temper tantrums that little kids have, and you just figure, no, she's just, you know, having a temper tantrum. So you sort of do brush that off.
When I would continue to have these temper tantrums as a full-grown adult, like, I would remember going, like, this is not normal. Other people aren't doing this. Like, I should not be having temper tantrums at 20 years old. Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
So that was something too that I knew was like other, you know, people with anxiety or depression, they're not doing this. So there has to be something more to it than just those diagnoses. Next question, which we've kind of already touched on, but what is something you now know about autism that you wish you could tell your younger self?
Because of the movie Rain Man, we all know, you think autism, you think of Rain Man, you know, and so I wish I had known how much, you know, what a spectrum it was. And you know, because I know Olivia did so well in school. You know, we've learned now that obviously that girls are underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed very frequently because they don't exhibit the typical signs that boys do, and they get the attention in school. And because she was, you know, straight A student, never caused any trouble, you know, she just flew under the radar. And like I said, the meltdowns and the troubles that we, you know, experienced usually happened at home under our roof, and I mean,
Nobody else saw
it. And I guess, not that I was trying to hide it, but I just, like, I knew, like, for me, I'm not taking her, I'm not going shopping.
Why put you through that? You know,
right. I'm just like, I mean, guess that was selfish. I'm not going out and have to deal.
No,
you
you're
know.
saving other people too.
Yeah, I think I just wish I had known more of the signs, you know, and it doesn't mean I would have been wanting to accept it at that point, you know, because I think when your child's young, you want them to lead a simple life and a happy life, and having autism does complicate some things for sure, for them and for the family. But once, the sooner you know, and you know why, I think, the biggest burden lifted off our shoulders when we found out why. And Olivia says, often, in fact, she wrote a little short story about, why. She's just always her whole life wanted to know why. Why this? Why do I do this? Why don't I do this? Why do I feel this way? Why don't I feel this way? And I guess I had a lot of those same why questions too. And so I think, be in tune with your child, seek the professional help, read lots of books, trust your instincts.
The person asked me the same question too. And I think I would just like to know about autism, because I didn't know what autism was even up until the
Conversation with Cindy.
Conversation with Cindy. I didn't really know what it was. And at that point I had somebody working for me at Unbaked who was autistic. And I was nothing like him, but I still didn't know what it was. Like, his mom came to me and asked if he could help me, and I was like, absolutely. And he was a fantastic worker, and I understood that he had autism, but I didn't know actually what that meant. And so, yeah, I think more awareness and at a younger age, like what autism is. And I think, like, I just did a video for an elementary school for Autism Acceptance Month, like explaining what autism is and stuff. So, like, that was great because, now maybe these kids will now know what it is. And one, it could help, them if they possibly feel connected to it, or just be kind and understanding to people who do have autism. What was your reaction to your daughter's diagnosis, and how did you respond? Yeah, crying.
Yeah, I think I burst into tears.
Yeah, she did.
But happy tears, I think.
And then my autistic self was like,
you didn't like that.
oh, it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay, Mom. It's okay. It's okay, Mom.
But yeah, just relief.
Yeah, relief.
Yeah.
Well, I think too that, like I said earlier, there's nothing in Olivia's videos for the most part that I don't already know or haven't already talked to her about. But it's the comments underneath that, I get choked up just thinking about it. The people that have said, oh my gosh, you're talking about me. And, and so I know the feeling of, what it was like to find out, finally get some answers. And so I read those, comments underneath, and I know that person is hopefully going to have that same, burden lifted and to start their journey and understand why.
Next question. Did I show aversion to taking baths, to touch, and to certain foods as a baby?
Definitely certain foods. We've gotten a lot better with that. And, we used to think she's a self-proclaimed vegetarian, although now she'll eat some fish. But that had nothing to do with the fact that it was an animal, because she didn't know, she was too little. She would, I used to give her those little chunky vegetables, and they had little chunks of chicken in them. And she would eat all the vegetables and then suck the juice out of the chicken and make a neat little pile right here on her high chair.
That was in my very first video. I talked about
that. And so we thought, I think as we, as she got older, we realized it was more of a texture thing and not so much that it was meat. And
yeah, because did you try to feed me more meat? I don't remember. Was there, or you just stopped?
Maybe a little here and there, but yeah, you'd walk into Nanny's house and she'd be making, pot roast or something. You'd say, oh, it smells so good in here. And she'd eat all the vegetables that had been cooked, all day long next to the meat. Didn't bother, so it wasn't the flavor, it wasn't the meat. It definitely, I think, was a texture thing. You had issues with texture.
Touch,
Touch. Yeah, she, as an infant, she liked to be held. I remember, I'd be making dinner, and her dad would come home, and she liked to lay on his chest, and the minute he'd try to put her down, she'd start crying. So it was kind of interesting. When she was an infant, she liked to be held and wanted to be held, and so I don't know really when that switch sort of went off, that suddenly she was just not real touchy-feely.
Tell him what I said to Teddy, though.
Oh, they still laugh about it, or we still laugh about it.
He was born on my half birthday.
Yeah, very good family friends. we would have play dates, and Teddy and his mom and I and Olivia would go to the park. I think Natalie might have been with us too, maybe as an infant, and Teddy would come over and like touch hers, and she'd go, "No touch arm." So to this day, we still say, "No touch arm." Oh, baths.
Baths. Which is interesting because I hate
Yeah.
bathing and showering, which I mentioned in a different video. So interesting. So I didn't used to hate it.
No, you liked your bath. I mean, you'd stay in there forever playing with your toys, actually.
Interesting. Maybe I just overdid it. Maybe.
Maybe.
I hate
Well,
it.
and I didn't, you didn't get a bath every night like some people did, because you
I
didn't.
think it's healthy.
It's not like you played out in the dirt like your sister.
Ate worms
Mud
and
clod.
stuff. How did family handle my traits as a child, and then what were their reactions when they heard about the diagnosis?
Well, we have a
Extended
big family, yeah, so it's hard to, pinpoint, but like some of the people like closest to you, let's say, like your grandparents, I think because one side of the family, there's so many grandkids, and the other, there's just a few, and they don't live nearby. So Olivia was much better with her dad's side of the family, because it was just, usually when she'd go over there, it was just the two of them, Grammy and Grampy, and it was quiet, calm. She got a lot of one-on-one attention, which is also what she needs. So I think when I would talk to my mother-in-law, or certain things would come up, I don't think they wanted to think there was anything that could be wrong or different, with their grandchild, because they never saw it. And which is, I think completely understandable. So she did much better when she would stay with Grammy and Grampy. When she would go with my mom and dad, she was okay. Like if I was there, and like I said, that's usually where she would grab my hand and pull me out of the room, because of the 16 grandkids, she was number 8 in line. And so there were already 7 running around when she arrived, which also meant the parents of the 7, because I'm one of 7, and so it's just a lot going on at Nanny and Papa's house, which I think now as an adult she handles, because now she can do it on her terms. So when she's feeling sociable, she can go over and have a good time and enjoy her cousins and her my side of the family. But even with that said too, with the family members on that side, she had a handful of aunts and uncles that would really talk to her one-on-one, pull her aside and really spend some time with her. And again, that's who she connected with. That's because that's what she would need. And so for those who just, maybe thought she was just a bit difficult child, maybe I wasn't strict enough, which of course when you hear later in life, it's like, you have no idea what I've been through, or what we've been through as a family. And, it's easy to criticize when you're not living it. So to those who didn't quite understand or didn't take the time to really get to know Olivia, I think when the diagnosis came along, it was like, oh, like that explains it.
Next question. What advice would you give parents who think their child may have autism?
Talk to your pediatrician, and don't, Olivia, I think probably has touched on this in other videos. Know your gut. Go with your gut, and if you're not getting answers or the right answers, even though coming from a professional, you would think, oh, they must know, I must not know. Be your own advocate. Be the advocate for your child. Just don't give up. You know your child. And,
yeah. That's what I always say. It's like, your child best. They don't know. They don't know. They're not living with the child. They don't know. And like for somebody like me, teachers too, they don't know, because I come in and I put my mask on and whatever. So it's like, of course they don't know. So unless you're telling them all the information, even if the doctor is educated enough, if you're not giving them all the information that they need to make a proper diagnosis, then they can't do their job. Unfortunately, a lot of doctors aren't educated enough. You have to be your child's own best advocate because you know them, and the professionals, they don't know unless what you tell them and the short amount of time they see the child.
Well, and what your doctor that diagnosed you said, you know, you're here because you're Olivia, and then pointed to me and said, you're here because you're the Olivia expert.
Final question, what's it like having a daughter with autism? Do you find it difficult to deal with her traits?
I love having a daughter with autism. I love having my daughter. Oh, I'll sneak that in while I can. So no, she's an amazing human being. She amazes me every day. You know, the things that she does. Try not to get choked up talking about this, but I'm very, very proud of her. I feel for her because I know the struggles that she's had and that she continues to have. But I'm proud of how she's handling them and how she's grown up, and especially since she's been diagnosed, how she's, you know, taken it all in.
Okay, that is all your questions for today. I hope my mom has answered them and they've been helpful. I think you did a really good job, not camera shy or anything.
Nope. You do have a little of me in you.
Yeah, just mostly my dad.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, thanks so much for the questions,
Yeah.
and thanks as always for the support and watching. I hope you have a great day. God bless, and talk to you soon.
I wish you the best. Happy Mother's Day.
Yes, happy Mother's Day.